Hey guys, Mike in the woods here. Recently, I tried to skate pack 300 kilometers on my electric skateboard. Link up at the top of the screen if you haven't watched that yet. And spoiler alert, it did not go according to plan. I wound up having to bail about halfway through. And while I didn't get to finish the trip, it actually turned out to be a gold mine of lessons learned and things to not do next time. And considering next year I'm planning on a 1,500 kilometer trip to the East Coast, I thought it was kind of important that I reflect on these points. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, here's a reminder to, and let's talk about them. Number 1, a lot of rural roads are really rough and often unpaved. You never truly appreciate smooth paved city roads and bike paths until you try and ride a longboard with polyurethane wheels out in the really rural areas. Out there you have to deal with aging asphalt that's really coarse, cracked as hell, and just quickly patched with lumpy additions. Or the road might not even be paved at all, with just hard-packed dirt and gravel. Still technically rideable on a street board, but because there's no vibration dampening, the wheels are solid polyurethane, and my deck is fairly stiff since I'm a heavy dude, it goes straight into the feet, man. It got so bad that my feet went numb and actually felt like they were burning. And man, did my ankle swell up from that. Having an all-terrain board would mostly fix this issue, but I can deal with it on the street board through a combination of being more aware of this during route planning. Google Maps Street View is a godsend here. And highly padded insoles for my trail runners, and just continuing to grin and bear it like I did on this trip. Number 2, I need large range and time buffers. For this trip, I naively tried to do a staggering 121 kilometers on the first day. Yeah, no, that was a mistake. I wound up doing only 92 kilometers on the first day, which all things considered, that's not bad. And that was after starting out super early in the morning and pushing it hard to try to reach that goal. I think what did me in so harshly was mostly my projected range on a full charge falling drastically short. And what really cut into it was a combo of the really rough terrain I mentioned earlier and severe uphill sections. On the second day, I barely scraped 40 kilometers out of my board between 3 batteries when I've gotten 50 plus kilometers with my full backpacking setup before. Not to mention, I stupidly gave myself a very strict timeline to complete this trip within 3 days with absolutely no buffer time in between as I started work again on Monday. That left me with no time for 0 days, Nero days, or any sort of buffer for my inevitable failure to keep up with my projected pace. My solution to this is twofold. The first part is to replace my small, degraded battery with a large 504 watt-hour battery, giving me a lot more range to work with as a buffer for the 50 kilometers in between charging stops. And the second is to, well, just give myself a lot more time to work with in the first place. For example, my major 1,500 kilometer trip next year, I plan to take 4 weeks off to complete that trip, which should be doable technically in 2 weeks under optimal conditions, 3 weeks most likely, and a full month for me as a worst case scenario, and I'm sure my boss is gonna love me when I approach him to book that off. Number 3, drastically cut down my filming setup. You might have heard me mention before that my full skatepacking backpack loadout is 40 pounds, which does include 3 liters of water and food. A good portion of that, maybe even up to 10 pounds, which is a quarter of the freaking pack weight, was just filming gear. I brought my drone, my DSLR and lens, 2 GoPros, and all the batteries and charging docks that entails. But on this entire trip, I really only used the GoPros, my helmet cam, and my selfie stick / mini tripod in my pocket. The DSLR got used very briefly during the evening shots while I was in the motel, but that's it. It was completely dead weight otherwise. And frankly, the GoPro Hero 8 Black's quality is actually phenomenal, so going forward, I won't even be bringing the DSLR on backpacking style trips, and this will cut down on a lot of bulk and weight in the pack. I do need to stock up on micro SD cards though, as I found myself running extremely short on them on this trip, and since then I've already gotten an additional 128 gig stick, and I'll for sure be getting way more soon. Number 4, I need to do way more varied training. Now, if you've watched my channel for a little while, you might have noticed that I'm actually starting to lose quite a lot of weight. I've been hiking nearly every day, currently up to almost 8 kilometers a day in my training route that I hike almost every day with my complete skatepacking loadout, minus the board of course. And while this for sure helped me out significantly during the portions of my skatepacking trip where I had to board carry, the actual riding sessions hit me a lot harder than I figured. It might not seem like it, but riding a board like this for hours and hours every day can actually hit you pretty hard, especially in the feet and lower legs. While obviously the board is doing all the work for propulsion, maintaining balance, especially with that heavy 40-pound pack on, puts all sorts of new and weird stresses on your legs that you don't normally experience in daily life if you don't ride on your board every day. For future trips, I'll need to get a few days practice in beforehand, or intentionally start myself off nice and slow with a few short days until I get my longboard legs back. Number 5, avoid highways and high-speed roads with unpaved shoulders. Of anything on the trip, this is what freaked me the hell out. Riding on major roads and highways that did not have a paved shoulder with one lane going each direction. Speed limits of 80 kilometers an hour, and let's face it, that's quaint compared to the speeds people actually drive. And with one lane in each direction, if it's even a moderately busy road, there's no space for traffic to pitch over into the opposite lane to pass me if I have to ride inside of the lane because there's no shoulder to ride on. Even with my bright orange pack cover on, and only braving riding on the quieter roads where traffic could pass me, this was absolutely dangerous, and I do not recommend anyone do this. It was stressing me out, to the point that on some sections I took alternate, much longer routes just to avoid these main busy roads. I mean, an all-terrain board can easily get around this by being able to ride on the unpaved shoulder, but for me it's a huge concern with a board that's only got street wheels. Going forward, I'll have to carefully plan around this in my routes, and Google Street View is the MVP here for being able to get a street level view to suss out these problem areas. Seriously man, I cannot express just how much this spooked me. I would rather add an additional 10 kilometers on rough, gravelly roads just to avoid this. Number 6, I need to be more fluid with overnight accommodations. A expensive lesson learned on this trip. Well, it only wound up being a one-nighter. I stupidly made the mistake of booking my campsite beforehand on the first night on a day where I was supposed to do 121 kilometers. Yeah, needless to say, I didn't make it to that campsite, and they don't really take kindly to last-minute cancellations. So not only did I burn the $50 I paid for the campsite, but I also had to spend more money on a motel for the night. Luckily, that only ended up costing me about $86 for the motel, but other hotels, especially if trying to book last minute on the day of, could be upwards of $150 a night, or even $200 if all the cheap shit's taken. Which is fine, I just need to be better prepared to expect that next time. No more booking accommodations beforehand. I need to be completely fluid with where I spend the night. Trying to book stuff last minute is obviously playing with fire, but it's the only way when I don't know how far I'm going to manage to make it in a given day, and I need to be prepared to take whatever's available, even if it's expensive. As well as remain open to the possibility of stealth camping in places that I really shouldn't be camping, or even just propping up against a building somewhere tucked out of the way, and urban cowboy camping, to put a polite name to it, for the night if need be. I also need to explore areas that I haven't really looked into much, such as Airbnb, warm showers, etc. Number 7, off-road and gravel is extremely harsh on the eskate drivetrain. Now, I did have the foresight to bring extra belts and the necessary tools to do a belt swap, but what surprised me is just how rough on the belts this trip was. I replaced one belt that was about to snap, and the replacement already looks like it's pretty gnarled up. Not only that, but I'm worried about the actual pulleys too, which are the part that sticks in the wheel and transfers torque from the belt to the wheel. I'm worried that it will get chewed up beyond usability too. Not to mention the bearings getting caked with gunk. It's all thanks to the dirt and fine gravel on not only the off-road sections, but even some of the sections of road that are paved are inexplicably littered with gravel and dirt. In the future, especially on longer trips like this 1,500 kilometer behemoth I'm planning, I need to pack more replacement belts since they're so light and don't take up much space, an extra set of bearings, and maybe even an extra pulley or two. And finally, number 8, I need to vary my methods of carrying the board during non-rideable sections. During sections of the trip where I couldn't ride my board, such as the batteries running out, gravel sections too loose to ride on, etc., I hand carried my board almost the entire time. Now, my board is 25 pounds, and it is not the most comfortable thing to be holding onto. I got quite a few hot spots on my hands and fingers from holding onto this damn thing, which could have turned into blisters if I had to deal with it for much longer than what I did. I need to switch up how to maneuver my board in these situations, and I already knew I had these options, but for whatever dumb-arse reason, I did not use them, but I certainly will be going forward. First is to hand carry, as I did for the majority of this past trip. The second is to accelerate the board without me on it by steering it by basically kicking around the tail, if it has any juice left in the battery. Third is to kick push it from behind, steering it by kicking around the tail. And lastly, I can loop some cordage around the front truck and pull it like a sled. Even if it has no juice to accelerate, I can still use the brakes on it, so I don't really have to worry about it getting away from me unless it's a really steep downhill. And now for a bonus, things that went right. It wasn't all doom and gloom, there were certainly some things that went right on this trip. The first is that outlet tester I bought was an excellent investment. It was instrumental in helping me identify outlets that had power running to them in a very quick and discreet way. I highly suggest getting one of these if you ride any sort of portable electric rideable, link to it in the description. The second is that aside from the pathing issues outlined earlier, it really does give me a great sense of freedom being able to travel across the country on nothing more than a motorized skateboard. If you like backpacking and any form of electric rideables, consider combining the two like this, whether it's an electric bicycle, scooter, unicycle, or a one-wheel. And the third and final good point is that there's plenty of publicly accessible places to charge, even in small towns like Blackstock, if you know where to look. Grocery stores and churches seem to be the surprising winners here. So, this trip, let's be real, it beat the crap out of me, but I'm a sucker for punishment, and don't worry, this hasn't deterred me from doing it again. In fact, just the opposite, it's made me even more excited for this 1,500 kilometer trip now that I know I've got the hard-learned lessons out of the way. Lots of suffering to be had, for sure, but at least now I know what I'm in for. If you want to build a board like mine or get a hold of any of the gear I used on this trip, check out the links in the description. If you're new to the channel, I combine fun, futuristic technology with traditional outdoors experiences. Consider checking out my other videos and subscribing if that's your thing. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next video.